Hello, welcome back to this little kind of video series I'm doing on colouring in my Amiga 1000 illustration. First job I want to do on this one, which is I didn't manage to do last time, was to finish some of the colouring. The first thing is to get the case colouring correct. Well, I say correct, it's as close as I can to what looks presentable. I mean, one of the things I noticed doing the research for these illustrations was that the varying range of colours you get for a lot of these machines because of their age. If you'd gone back to 1985, you'd probably get exactly the same colour on every Amiga 1000. Now we're in 2023. You look at an Amiga 1000 from one person, you go to somebody else who's got one, and you put them next to each other. They don't look quite the same colour. So this is more of an estimation based on memory, based on photos, and based on what looks acceptable, I suppose. I did play around on this little bit because I was just fiddling around with a few different hues, which is why it probably looks a bit odd that I'm sitting there playing with the color the color wheel. Now with the 1000, it's I think it was lighter than a lot of the later Amigas that followed it. So I was trying here to get kind of a light color, but I'm trying to form a base that I will be able to shade and will be able to add highlights to. Part of the process I use is I like to fill every area with a baseline color. The reason being is that when it comes to doing all the detailing later on, which is like shading and highlights and maybe some extra little bits and pieces that just to give it a little, hint of detail, I like to have a base color that is almost like an average hue of what the color would be if there was no shading on it. So, for instance, the PCB's green and the power supply area is like a dark grey, and then I can apply my colours on the top of that afterwards. Whether there's a light source coming in that might be slightly different colour or whatever, it's there so that I've got that foundation to build the artwork on. Now, the thing with the monitor is that I didn't realise, but a lot of these monitors are slightly different colours to the machines, which kind of makes sense when you think about it, because they're all, they're not manufactured by the same people, and the plastics they use were different, and the colouring they use were different. So, in doing this, I wanted to again make sure the colour was slightly different, and also with the bezel that goes around the outside of the screen, that's a little bit darker. But again, I didn't want to make it too dark, which I think some of them are. I wanted to make sure it sort of is a good foundation for me to work from. Going on to the Amiga 1000 case and keyboard, it's probably as close to the monitor. I think it might be the same colour as the monitor for this because I can then adjust that when I'm doing the shading, and the keys as well. I'm going through doing the keys. I must say, when I was doing the other illustrations, doing keys just drags on and on and on. So this is probably the most laborious process when you're going through selecting keys with the select tool, and you're going through and you're colouring them all in. And it gets worse when you do the shading, because you're trying to put like an idea of a dip inside the key, and often you've got to be quite on it, otherwise you can end up going over and shading other areas. So again, with the keyboard, I'm going back to the keyboard colours. The looking at the reference photos, the keys for the 1000 were quite lighter. So I'm trying to make sure that they kind of give myself a good base colour to work from, and so otherwise you end up with colours that you can't work with. I've got quite a few reference photos for the 1000, and it's just crazy because you look at some and the colours are one way, you look at another photo and the colours are a different way. And unfortunately, my 1000 is in storage under a load of boxes which I can't actually get to at the moment. So if I could get it out, I would, but I just can't get to it at the moment. I was going to pull the thing out and looked at the original, but I think it's gone a bit yellow. So again, what do you do? You can look at historic photos, I suppose, for reference, but it's just sometimes you just have to go with it, and if it looks good, then that's fine. I have to say, I do like the 1000 keyboard. It's always had quite a nice touch to it for me. I don't know if that's because I came from a Commodore 128, which again had a nice keyboard, but it was this whole excitement of having the 1000. But I have such good memories of this keyboard, and the first time I pulled it out from its little keyboard garage underneath, and the little curly cable that came with it. For this, I haven't put the curly cable in, because that did actually on the 1000 was detachable. I think it had like a little telephone socket style connector, and you could disconnect it, and so, which was great little feature. So for the purposes of being being a kind of like a bit sort of sneaky, I didn't draw it for the book because the thought of doing a curly cable was like, oh, maybe I should just leave it out, and I did. So, so that's what I did. Um, but thankfully, I didn't do it with the mouse one because you can't do that with the mouse. So I left that in, and obviously on the last one, if you watched it, you'd see me redo the the mouse cable, and put it on a different colour and a different slant now. Same with the mouse buttons here. They're those colours aren't correct, so I'm trying to make sure they come out a bit better than they sort of look at the moment. Which are very similar, I think, to the key colours there. I don't know what colour I used on this one. I think it was an off colour to the one that's already on there. Just building up the foundation of the colour base so that we can add some shading and some lighting later to it. It's a bit of a funny thing doing these because I'm not really going to do a voiceover on the next one. I'm going to do it live because this has been proven to be quite a bit of an uphill struggle trying to get the video running and me recording and knowing what to say without talking like an absolute idiot, which you're probably sitting there thinking, Stu, you sound like an absolute idiot, but you know, it is what it is. What's next? Oh, that's right. I'm going to be going on to the, if I remember when I was doing the edit to this, I'm going to be going on to the components in a minute, which is a bit more interesting in looking at me colouring up the mouse buttons. Now, the thing with this is because I use the PCB layer, which is just this one big slab of green colour, you can't, now, you can't really see the component colours underneath all the chips and the other components. And one of the things I noticed when I was doing this is I've often leave little bits out, which, like there's a bit of line art which has been omitted. So one of the good things is I can go back over some of these drawings and I can fix up some of the mistakes I made or some of the bits I might have bodged when I brought it into Krita to do the colouring. I've messed up, and you can go through and you can edit them back in. This I don't think was on the original. I think this is something I did when I was doing me last video. Probably because I was too busy talking to people on the chat and I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. So anyway, as you can see, now I'm going through and I'm deleting areas on the PCB layer so that anything that's underneath it will shine through, i.e. the colours of the chips and the colours of the components, resistors and capacitors and such like. I could have done this when I coloured the PCB in initially. It would have made sense to just highlight each component and do it this way, but I just find it's nice for me just to do a blank fill, select that one and then do this, do it like this. I mean, other artists might do it a different way, but this just is how I work and it kind of works for me. Now, I did do this in speed up. This is a bit more time lapse in a minute because this can take a long time, and I think I did speed up the video by about 2 or 3 times. And there's a few areas where I've actually sped it up by 6 times just because it can take quite a long time to do all this selection, delete. You're probably asking, well, why don't you just hit the delete key and go through with your pen and just delete it? Very good question. I don't know. No, actually I do. The reason being is it's all right when you're doing these little bits. You can just do it with as you can see here, you just scrabble around and just delete bits. But when you're doing things that are straight, often it's very easy to do it because you're rushing, you want to get done quickly, is to just delete a bit and think, oh, I've got to undo that bit. So I tend to do anything that's square, I tend to use with the selection tool and delete. But when I'm doing stuff like this, which has got curves and a bit more, a bit arty, with the old hand, a bit arty, you can you can just do it by hand like that and not worry about so much of the edges. Now, doing all these resistors, that's a bit of a pain, to be honest, because it's just, you think you're trying to keep in the lines, and I mean, I don't enjoy this bit. I'm not moaning about it, but it's just this like foundation work. This is like the building the foundation of the rest of the illustration. It's got to be done. Someone's got to do it. It's me. Just get on with it. Close your eyes. Well, I could close my eyes, but it wouldn't look very good. You know what I mean? Shut your eyes and hope for the best. So get it all done. Get all these foundation bits in, and then you can go through later and do the fun part, which is all the shading, the detail, and a bit that really brings the illustration to life. I mean, if you've seen any of the other drawings I've done and the other colours I've done on this series, you'll see that the components are coloured up, they're shaded, the chips have got a nice sheen over them. There's a nice bit of shadow going on, and it just looks really good. I'm really pleased with it. I mean, there's one I did, which was the Apple II, the Apple IIe, when I coloured that up. there's a little bit on the Apple IIe where the power supply sits within the case. And when I did it, I thought, oh, you know, there's a shadow. When I was looking at reference photos, I noticed that the light was being blocked out with the power supply, and it was casting a shadow, but it wasn't like a precise shadow. So I don't know where the lights were when we took the photos, but it just looked really good. And I thought, well, if I can try and recapture that look in the drawing, that looked really cool. And I think I managed to pull it off. So if you look at the Apple IIe that I did, you'll see that you can see that there's a shadow on the inside the case, which looks really good, and also the PCB expansion cards. Again, the colouring on that, I just really enjoyed getting that right. I looked at a lot of it and I thought, well, yeah, that's exactly the shade to go. So again, with all these machines, you're trying to capture the essence of what the machine is, you know, from the colours to the style. And one of the things I notice is a lot of the PCBs have got different colouring to them. So, like for instance, on the ST, I think the ST PCB is motherboard is a bit more of like a greeny bluish colour, whereas on some of the others, like I think the Amiga and I think the Commodore 64, I think it's more of a greenish PCB motherboard. And you know, it's just one of those things you don't think of. You think, oh, they're all the same, but when you look at them, you think actually they're not. And you don't notice that until you start looking at them in great detail. Now, this is what's called a budget and fix, which is when I did the original, I'd totally and utterly forgot to put these chip pins in. Just totally forgot. And it's only when I come to do this, the first video, that I realised that I'd left them out. So I'd obviously blanked it in, but just totally left them out. Don't think anybody noticed what they do now because I've spilt the beans, haven't I? So the great thing about doing these videos is I can go back and I can think, oh yes, I can fix that bit on the drawing, I can fix this bit, and I can make that bit there. Now, when you look at the chips, if I was doing a technical illustration, a lot of this would be all the same sort of size. It'd all look the same. The lines would be identical, and you know, it would be a proper technical illustration. It'd be, you know, very precise. Well, this is not the sort of style I was going for. I wanted to make something that looks hand drawn but still had its foot firmly in some kind of, you know, sort of some kind of like solid reference. So you look at it and think, yeah, that looks believable, but it's a drawing and it's a bit of a, you know, it's not exactly as looking at a photo. So one of the ways I did that was I made sure the brush I used, which I think I mentioned on the last video, has got this kind of coarseness to the edging, and you can see that on the pins when you look at all the chips. Each pin is slightly different, and I've just gone through and I've just, as you saw on this bit I just did, you can just go through and just go, yep, dub 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 dub, and they're all different. But when you zoom out of the resolution you can be looking at, the size you're looking at, doesn't really matter. It just looks all right, you know. And that's the thing about doing this sort of stuff, is it doesn't have to be dead on precise. You know, you can get away with like little bits sticking out and little bits cutting off there, and because it's an organic drawing. It's not like done with, say, 3D software, or it's not done with sort of vector graphics, or, you know, I mean, if I'd have done something like this in Inkscape, or I'd use, like, you know, Affinity Designer or something like that, or even Illustrator, you could get the precise lines, you get the chips looking spot on, all the lines would be matching up, and it would look fantastic, but it would look very kind of like technical. I didn't want that. I wanted to look organic. I wanted to look organic, but still have its feet firmly set in the technical sort of arena. So yeah. One thing which I should mention is that when I do a lot of this stuff, I tend to blanket fill a lot of areas and then go back in afterwards and add in the extra colour. So one example of that is this bit here, where I'm just blanket filling all these ports at the back. And you can see that it doesn't matter if I miss bits off, because I know I'm going to go back afterwards and go, you know, it's like a two-pass process. Say for instance those audio ports, I know they're not that colour, but I just do it anyway because that's part of the process. I'll do it anyway, and then I'll go back and think, right, okay, do I want to add a different colour, or I want to add that with the shading later? So that's the composite video port that will be coloured in a different colour. Doing the back plate there, which I've totally messed up. I should have just selected the thing. This is what happens, you see, when you're doing a voiceover, you sometimes forget that what you're actually doing on the video. So the next one I do, I will not be doing a voiceover. I'll be doing it live. Whether I draw it live as a pre-record, and then draw, talking over while I'm doing it, or I actually go live and do a live stream. I don't know yet. I'll see what my schedule's like, and what I'm doing. Now, looking at these are the audios. Now you see that the white port there, and this is the yellow port for the composite video. If you look at some of the reference photos, they're not really that colour. They're kind of that sort of colour, but I'm preparing it for when I'm adding the shading later. So I might do a highlight which enhances that colour, and I might do some like deeper shading, which might actually be like a little bit of a blue in there, or a slight bit of green in the, when I add it in, just so it mixes with the base colour. That's what this process is all about. It's not about the final image. At this stage, it's all about laying in these foundations so that I know that when I come to do it, I've got those foundations laid and those colours are exactly what I want. This can be quite a lengthy process, as you can see. So for that reason, I've actually sped this bit up in the video when I edited it. I think I've put 3 or 4 times speed on it. There is a section later where I did a 6 times speed because it just took so long for me to go through and select. I think I had a few distractions, like my phone started going, and I had some emails popping in, so I had to stop. But as you can see, it can be quite a laborious process, and I'm so thankful I didn't go through and add loads and loads and loads and loads of components to these illustrations, because it would have took forever. But that wasn't the reason, for doing it. It's got to be a colouring book. That's what it was for. And if you're going to do something that's too technical, it might put people off colouring it. I mean, I did consider doing some which were really really technical. So they're really kind of representative of the real machines, with all the components, all the wires, all the little design flaws in them, in the cases, all the little bits and pieces. But I thought, well, one, it would take longer to draw one, and two, would anyone actually really want to sit and colour all that in? Might be alright as a piece of art on the wall, which is fine, but the purpose of this was actually to create something that people can colour at home. Whether they want to colour in the colouring book or they want to get hold of the PDF and print the sheets out themselves. It's so that you can have a go, whether you want to do it with like crayons, colouring pencils, whatever, and have a go. I mean, one thing I did look at was whether it'd be quite cool to do a sort of a graphite pencil version of some of these drawings. So I take one of the illustrations and I go over it, and I just use just my graphite pencils, and see what I can do with that. Other options would be cross hatching, which would be interesting. Cross hatching is something I do enjoy doing, but it is a very very time consuming process, because you have to really go through and line up your lines and get the shading looking right. But it's an awful lot of fun. So yeah. This bit here was a bit of a challenge when I did the original, because I couldn't work out the best way of putting this in. So I think I made up some of this as I went along when I drew the original. Just kind of, it's almost like like an average of what's there. So you know there's something there, but you don't really pay much attention to it because it's right at the edge. Again, what I said earlier about going through and adding the colours on top. So I've blanket filled these back ports. Now I'm adding all the bits that are going to be metal on the final drawing. Doesn't matter if I go over the edge, because I'm going to correct that. And as you can see, just adding those in, and these will all be shaded up later. So a nice little bit of highlights, a little bit of shading. This bit here, just fill it all in. It's quicker. Missed a bit there. Let's colour that in. Doing this bit here, let's do the same with this one. A bit of metal on that one, the metal pins on this one coming down. I could have gone the other way. I could have deleted those lines and just drawn the white lines down, but then that would have kind of moved away from the style of the artwork. So it's nice to keep everything true within the style of it is a colouring book image after all, so we've got to keep it true to that. Going through adding all the screws in, make sure they're nice white, ready for colouring later and shading. Looking at any other areas that need a bit of attention. Sometimes you can go through and you do something and you just leave one off. I mean, I think it was on the Amiga. I did a load, and I realised there was one resistor that I'd forgot to colour in. No idea how I did it, but you look back and think, oh, how did I manage that? So there's always the chance that something will be missed off. This bit here, I'm just going through and adding just a bit of shading for the labels, just to give it a bit of variety. Just preparing it for when I come back later to do the final couple of passes on it. Sometimes you look at these labels, you think, what do you add? Again, blanket filling is something that I like to do on some of these areas. I looked at the reference photos, and inside the disk drive you can't really see anything. So I've hinted on the line art. I've hinted that there are bits and pieces there, but in reality you don't really see it because the light would be coming down. So what I've done on here, I thought I'll shade it all in grey, and then just come back later and I can darken it all up so you'll just see a hint of detail there. Some of these areas here, I've no idea if they're actually true to the original. They're kind of interpretations. I mean, it can play with your brain sometimes when you're doing things in perspective and you're trying to get things all at an angle. So often you can kind of do an interpretation, and sometimes you mess up. Like here, I forgot to leave this bit out because you actually see through that area of the case. So what I've done here is I've had to go through and edit the lines back in. Looking at the reference photos here, I was thinking, right, okay, there's a little bit of plastic that pops up there. So I've put another line in, give it a bit of colour at the back, so that's true, and then also create a little bit of a kind of a suggestion that it dips back. Now the great thing is you don't really see that, but when you look at it, at a glance, and you just see a little hint that it's going back. And so yeah, so the next bit would be to I've noticed when I was coming through looking at the reference photos, this bit here on the power supply was actually not fully correct. If for some reason it dips down and loops back the lines, so I thought, right, okay, correct that. I don't know why it's like that. It's really weird, isn't it? And when I did the original, I must have just done a line across to tidy it up so it was in line with the bottom. Looking at it needed this doing to it, so it's a little bit more work, but just correcting a few little bits and pieces ready for when I'm colouring it all in. And I think we're nearly close to finishing. Removing some of the details because I'm going to go back over later and I'm going to add them all in with one of the detail layers. So this is obviously for the line art version for the colouring book, and that's it. So anyway, I think we're pretty much done now. And if you haven't subscribed already, don't worry about it. I'm only joking. If you do feel like you want to subscribe to keep notified of new videos, then please do. I don't intend to become a YouTuber. This is just a little side thing I'm doing just to give me a focal point for doing these illustrations and to share some of the processes that I use along the way so people get an insight into how some of this stuff is done. I've got a little shop which some of you may know about called thedesignjoy.co.uk where you can buy prints and canvases of my work. I do intend to add more stuff to that as time goes on, so please check that out if you feel inclined. I also have my own personal site up and running now, although it's really not finished. There's a lot of things to be done on it still, but I thought, hey ho, just launch it, get it up there, and I can pad it out as I go along. So there's a lot of things on there which probably link to pages which have got a title but there's like one word, or the galleries aren't complete, but I'm working on it, and it should start to develop as time goes on. I'm also on social media, as you probably know, so if you like me on, if you'd like what you see, follow me on there. I will be putting future sort of videos up on there so that people can see that there's new stuff. Part 3 will be coming out probably in the next week to 2 weeks, probably. I may do it as a live stream, let's see, or the other option is I might do this as a pre-record, but I will be talking over the top as I do it, rather than doing what I've done today, which has proven to take far longer than I anticipated, and therefore I don't think I could do it like this again, because the post-editing was just crazy. Even though you think, well, there's nothing to it, Stu. What are you looking at? It's only 20 minutes. What are you talking about? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.